Okay, it looks like we're live. So I want to welcome all the faculty today to our town hall. I'm Bill Persinger, the Executive Director for Public Relations and Marketing, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. I do have a few housekeeping items to share with you before we begin. These sessions are, as you just heard, are being recorded and will be made available on the university's Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter pages. We'll begin with a broad overview that may cover many of your questions. I'll present previously submitted questions to President White and the senior leadership team. To ask questions, if you'll use your Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, we can present them to the group. If we cannot respond to all questions prior to the allotted time, we'll post questions and provide answers if possible on the university's social media outlets mentioned previously as soon as possible after this session. Now, with us today, we have the senior leadership team, which consists of Dr. Elisa White, our president. I hope all y'all know her. Dr. Rex Gandy, provost and vice president for academic affairs. And if everybody will wave, I forgot to tell you to wave. Dr. Eric Norman, vice president for student affairs. Mr. Mitch Robinson, vice president for finance and administration. General Ron Bailey, vice president for external affairs. Dr. Carol Clark, assistant vice president for community and government relations. Danelle Whiteside, Vice President for Legal Affairs and Secretary to the Board, and Gerald Harrison, our Athletics Director. In addition to the senior leadership team, we also have with us Michael Kazitz, Assistant Vice President for Public Safety and the Chair of the APSU COVID-19 Task Force. Dr. Rod Mills, Assistant Professor of Agriculture and Faculty Senate Chair, could not be with us today due to a Faculty Senate session, and he'll be speaking at the May 4th Town Hall. At this time, I'd like to recognize Dr. White to provide some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry that we did schedule this at a time there was a called Faculty Senate meeting. I wasn't aware of that at the time, and President Mills will be with us at the next meeting on Monday, and I believe he's an associate professor. Bill, I don't want you to give him a demotion here on the air. That doesn't go well. So thank you for joining us today. We're really happy to have the opportunity to connect. I miss seeing people. I'm in conversation with people all day, as I know you are, and it takes a lot of work behind the scenes to keep the university moving and going. And I know that you are doing a lion's share of that work, trying to keep your students connected to the university, to each other, to you, to their disciplines, and getting them through the semester. So first of all, just thank you. This would not have been possible to even continue without your heroic work over the week. And in some cases, you really had just about a week to convert the rest of the semester to a non-face-to-face format. And I cannot even fathom that. I've taught online before, but doing it on such short notice in such fearful circumstances is really tough. And so thank you for that. Thank you for keeping us moving, keeping the students moving. Also, I hope your families are well. I hope that you are well. It's a tough time for the nation right now, and of course for Tennessee and our community in Austin Peay. But we are a family, and I use that word not lightly, but I've seen it actually in action, because so many of those I have interacted with, some of you, some of the staff and students, are asking, how can we help each other? How can we be there to support our university, to support our students, and to support our fellow employees, our colleagues? And so thank you for being a family. We can choose to be a family, and you have, and so I thank you for that. The point of today is to give you an opportunity to ask questions. I've got the senior leadership team here because some of your questions may pertain to a particular area or be under the jurisdiction of one of our SLT members. Forgive me I keep going for my glasses. I needed them fixed a couple of months ago. Right as everything closed up, I rolled over on them, and here we go. So I have developed this weird habit, but we've got people here today who have expertise in the areas of your concerns. I also asked AVP Kasitz to be here because he's chairing the COVID-19 task force. I asked that task force to start work almost immediately after we were confronted by this pandemic. It is a large task force, and I will ask AVP Cassis to explain kind of the makeup, but know that it is large, it is broad, and it represents almost every area of campus, because we need the intellectual contributions of our whole campus. And we need to know, if we pull a particular thread, we need to know what sleeve is going to fall off, how that's going to impact the people on campus who really need our best decisions so that they can serve our students and also be safe. And so I mentioned Mr. Cassett's in that task force. Their initial charge was to get us through the end of the semester, but I've also asked them to continue to work to advise the SLT on reopening and how we can work this summer. And then some of their work is bleeding into even the fall. I've also asked Lieutenant General Ron Bailey to work with Mitch Robinson and what we call as a smaller group. They call it a SPIT group, but it's a strategic planning group that's to look at the university operations for the next 2 years. I asked them to come up with a lot of different scenarios, and not all of these scenarios are probable. The idea is to not be surprised by anything. So we are looking at absolute worst case scenario to absolute best case scenario. And I've asked them to come up with as many options as possible to give us some tools in the tool belt as events unfold and as we get more data about what our situation will be. Know that both the COVID-19 task force and the SPIT group are not sitting in a room making decisions for the campus. I've asked them to bring ideas forward and to have plenty of opportunities for you to bring ideas forward, because it's the people on the ground who know the best creative ways to meet the challenges of the future. And I need you to bring those ideas. No idea is too far out there, because you may have something that on its own, standing by itself, may not work. But coupled with somebody else's great idea, we can do something that's great for the institution. So be free with your sharing of your ideas to the COVID-19 task force and to the SPIT group. And so I know that Mr. Persinger will start your questions in a moment, but before we get started, I would like for Mr. Cassis to explain a little bit about the work of the COVID-19 task force.
Thank you so much. I was really scared when I got the email from President White asking me to chair this committee, to be quite honest with you. And it started out with about 20 members. And because of needs and different areas we identified, it's expanded to about 33 faculty members and staff members and some administrators across the university. Our first task was to figure out how to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and what that would mean for our university. And as quickly as things changed, we went from talking about the schools that were closing to being a school that operated differently overnight. I think that happened in about a 30-minute time span. So things moved rapidly, and then bringing all the pieces together to figure out how to get off campus and still provide the services that our students required. And so it's been a great group effort from everybody. I know that some of the faculty members that are on the task force are listening in right now, and I appreciate your attendance and I appreciate all your hard work, because I thought I knew university operations, and it turned out I knew very little about university operations. I've learned so much over the past 2 months, and I've really gained a new respect for just about every area of campus and what they do. So now we are looking at how we safely get back to campus. It's a whole new challenge because it's not going to go as fast as what we were experiencing when we had to get off campus. So just know that we're working hard for you. We accept any and all ideas. We're looking at it through different lenses and running risk models to see what the acceptable risks are for bringing people back to campus. But we meet every single day, and I'm amazed every morning at how many people come to our meetings. It hasn't died down yet, and that's a testament to the people we have on this group. It's not sustainable. I know that people are getting burned out. I know that I'm experiencing a little burnout, but then all of a sudden you take about 5 minutes and rejuvenate, and you refocus on what our mission is, and then we're back at it again.
Thank you. Mr. Persinger.
Thank you, Dr. White and Mr. Kazitz. So I'm going to move now to the pre-submitted questions. I also see we're beginning to receive some submitted questions. The first question is actually for Dr. White and Mr. Kazitz. Can you speak to the concerns about reopening the university too soon?
I'll start and then ask Mr. Kazitz to chime in with some of the considerations that the task force is considering. First of all, I don't believe we are going to open too soon. And even though our state and region of the United States, many states are opening now, some this week and some in a phase 1 environment next week, we have chosen not to do that. We are open for business, but we are not on campus. And so the density of campus is still very much reduced, and there are a few people here. There are a few people who have to be here, but most people are working remotely. We made a decision to stay working in that environment for the month of May, and that gives us an opportunity to look at data that comes in. What happens when people are given more freedom? If there's a spike, I don't mean a day spike. For instance, you have to look at the numbers. Tennessee's numbers, when they have grown exponentially, it's been because of some viral activity in a nursing home or a packing plant, or some location where social distancing was not the norm. Or I can't say that about all the places, but I can say that typically the spike is because of something happened in a one locality. So we want to see what happens when people are given more freedom. I'm also asking people to use wisdom. I'm going to go to the grocery store later, and I'm going to be very careful about what happens when I do and when I get back in my car. I'm one of those who wipes down the steering wheel and everything else. I use the wipes on my hands, and as soon as I go home, I wash everything off before I put it away. And so I'm maintaining some personal habits that have been recommended by the CDC. And so if people do that, then I expect the data to show that we will be able to have more freedom because people are being responsible and how they respond to the environment. That said, the university cannot stay closed to visitors if the world is open. So we have to figure out a way to get back. We have to figure out a way to continue to meet the needs of our students and our external stakeholders who need to conduct business face-to-face. How that's done, however, has a great deal to do with the work of the COVID-19 task force and their recommendations to the SLT. So I'd like for Mr. Kazitz to talk about some of the options being considered and some of the data that is being reviewed by the COVID-19 task force.
Thank you. First of all, it's hard for me to exercise patience. I want to get back just as quickly as everybody else, and I really would like life to return to normal. That being said, the first thing I said when I heard Governor Lee was reopening things in a phased approach was we have to be patient and we have to see what happens. Fortunately, we have good faculty members who are running risk models. We have a virologist who's working with actuarial sciences to run those to see what the numbers are doing right now. And that tells us what the risks are. And then hopefully in a couple of weeks, we'll have more data to see what we're doing and how we can return to campus. We're going to have to continue social distancing. We're going to have to figure out new ways to deal with students, deal with visitors, deal with anybody that you're going to be dealing with. When I walk down the hall of Harnett Hall, the offices there for the faculty are so small that it's almost not even 6 feet from the doorway to where the the professor sits. So, you know, that's something that people are going to have to think about, and they're going to have to think of their own safety as well. You know, do they keep their doors open or closed? Do they, their office hours, are they just open office hours, or are they by appointment only, and where they hold those, because you're going to be in proximity to people. So those are the things that our group's looking at. Human Resources has the group that's looking at actual new procedures and potential policy changes to protect our faculty and staff. We've got a group from facilities that are looking at the actual physical facilities, as well as safety enhancements and temporary markings that show social distancing and things like that. We've got the events group that is looking at reserved events and how we handle those in the future. Because right now we're not accepting any type of events, but we're starting to get requests again because things are opening up across the state. And we've got so many other groups. We've got a medical group that's looking at, you know, what happens if somebody gets sick after we return to campus. We're already planning for those things. So there's a ton going on behind the scenes, way too numerous to mention, and more than I can remember right now. But just know that people are working hard on this to ensure that we get back open, but we do so in a healthy and safe manner.
Thank you, Dr. White and Mr. Kazitz. And I think you've already kind of touched on this next question, Mr. Kazitz, but I want to go ahead and ask it in case there's any other details you think we need to add here, which is what precautions will be in place for staff and faculty?
And I did kind of hit on that. One of the things is the social distancing markers and potential signs. We have areas that have high customer rates, such as financial aid and admissions at certain times of the year. So we're looking at transparent barriers that can protect them, the sneeze guards that you see at Publix when you go there, things of that nature. We're having to prioritize those. We're going to be working with the building coordinators to figure out those areas. You know, we're going to ask people to maintain social distancing and to constantly wash their hands. Hand sanitizer is kind of hard to get a hold of now, but we're still trying to stockpile some of that so that we have those in place. And obviously we're looking at classroom sizes and how much, what's the capacity of those classrooms, not by fire code, but by social distancing recommendations. So we might have a classroom that can only be at 30 or 40% of the normal occupancy under fire code. So how do we deal with that? Because there's a lot of classes that have a whole bunch of people in them. So reducing class sizes or figuring out a way to move certain classes to larger spaces so that we can keep those social distancing guidelines. Those are just some of the precautions we're trying to take and we're looking at.
Thank you. The next question I'm going to again direct to both Dr. White and you, Mr. Kazitz. When will a decision be made about the fall semester, and what sources are being used to help you make this decision?
So I have asked that the COVID-19 task force and also General Bailey's longer range planning group to give me some scenarios and options by the 1st of June. It doesn't mean that the decision will be made at that point. It means that we will have some if-then statements. So we know that if the data point to X, then we'll pull the lever on Y. And so we'll know what our options will be depending on what the data show us. Now you all read the same things I read daily, and we heard today a number of universities have announced that they're opening on ground for fall. But really what they're saying is what we're saying in a little bit different way. Our intention is to have some form of online and a mix of online and on-ground classes in the fall. It's going to be very difficult to ask students who are looking for that traditional experience to start their educational journeys if we don't offer some semblance of connection to them. That doesn't mean it'll look like it did before. It also doesn't mean that I'll be sitting here in the office deciding what the faculty are going to do. We need your brains in this. And I realize right now that you are very much covered up with trying to finish the semester, but we need your best ideas to be going to these groups on how you can do it. So I know some of the faculty have talked about hybrid classes where they do something online and they do some face-to-face, or they do a low residency model, or they do, as we talked before, move to a larger location. And so there are a lot of ways that it could look, but you are the architects. And so we need for you to think about ways that you can teach your students without lowering the number of students that we can teach. Because frankly, if our enrollment and our student credit hours go down considerably, if we just cut everything, then we're talking about a budget morass that will be very difficult to deal with without some major impact on the campus. And so we need to do both. Think creatively how we can operate, how we can offer that on-ground experience, but in a way that is safe for the campus community. The win will come when the data show us the story. So we know the intention. I'll get those reports and recommendations from those two groups I mentioned. Those will be considered by the senior leadership team. And then we will think about what the data are telling us at that point. And if we can say definitively at that point, we will. If not, we'll wait a little bit longer. But whatever happens, we need to be prepared that something could happen either later in the summer or in the fall. That means we need to pivot again. And if that's the case, please do what you can to be ready. I know it's a terrible burden to think about different pedagogies when you really just want to be thinking about one. But this semester was difficult for you. It was difficult for students. If there is a resurgence in the fall or some sort of change, then we can't be caught unawares like we were this time. I don't think higher ed can afford that nationally again. I'll also tell you, if the decision is made that we have to go fully online, our enrollment is going to go down because students are very clear that they are not happy with the current experience. And it's not you. It's not that they're unhappy with their faculty. I've had many contact me and say, my faculty members are trying to help me, but I don't have the internet connection. I don't have the Wi-Fi. I don't have the support at home. I'm dealing with 3 kids at home and I'm trying to do my work at the same time. And I also know those same concerns are your concerns. You are in a different environment as well. So regardless of what happens in the fall, we have to be prepared to do something of quality and have it thought through and planned beforehand, just in case our world turns upside down again. And I'm hoping that's not the case. Chief, AVP.
Yeah, as Dr. White said, we're looking at different sources. The biggest thing is going to be CDC recommendations, what the state of Tennessee is doing, what other universities are doing that are based in best practices. You know, just coming back without a good plan is not a good plan at all. So that's exactly what we're going to do, is we're going to learn from the data and adjust as necessary.
Thank you, Dr. White and Mr. Kazitz. Mr. Kazitz, this is another one for you. What policies and procedures will be put in place to keep students, faculty, and staff safe once we return to campus?
Those are being developed right now. You know, we're looking at ways that we can have protection for people, trying to stockpile hand sanitizer and some other supplies, trying to bring up procedures on if someone tests positive after we return, what are the procedures there? And they're going to be different for the residence halls than somebody in a classroom or a staff member in their office who's exposed, and how we can come back for that. The subgroup, the human resources subgroup in the COVID-19 task force is working diligently on this because the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff is paramount.
Thank you. The next question I'm going to direct to Dr. Norman and Mr. Robinson. How can faculty best support our APSU Govs communities for example, students, other faculty, staff, and administrators, how can they support that community if major changes or cuts are necessary based upon our shared future situation?
From my perspective, it's really about asking what are their needs and then communicating that to us so we can make sure we're addressing them. We found out that our students, when they moved off campus, many of them did have different issues. Some of it was technology, sometimes it was food, sometimes it was funds. So we've worked with Advancement to generate money for the SOS fund. We provided hotspots, we provided laptops. We are making sure that we have mental health services available for our students, even though they may be in remote locations or off campus. So really anything that you can do to communicate what they may need, I think is going to be the first point, and then supporting them. At this point, we've asked for flexibility, and I would say that's been met. Our students are experiencing a very different experience than they anticipated, and I think they're navigating that as much as the faculty are as well. So we need to come together and try to figure out how to best handle that.
I might add too that we are looking at what potential financial issues that we might face for the 2021 fiscal year. We are developing a financial planning task force that will have probably at least as many or more, probably more members than what is on the COVID-19 task force. Just because I think it's really important, and President White believes this too, that we have as much input from the campus community from the ground up in order to provide input of what is important for this campus, and more importantly, what is important for our students. One of the things that we will be looking at is, as President White had mentioned in an earlier town hall, about over 70% of our budget is related to faculty and staff salaries and benefits. And one of our objectives will be to not look at eliminating staff and faculty as much as eliminating things that we can do without. And one of the things that we will use as a measure is what are the things that affect the students the most? I mean, they need support, especially if they're in an online environment. And what are the things that we need to invest in order to make sure that their needs are being met? So I think it's really important that when we start looking at our financial future, that we consider those types of priorities. And again, we need to do this from the ground up. And as a consequence, that committee is actually going to be developing and analyzing the data and looking to make recommendations to the senior leadership team for ways that we might even enhance revenues that we have coming into the university to offset some of the potential issues that we might deal with in terms of declining state support or potentially even declining enrollments. So I think there's a lot of things to think about. There's a lot of information that we need to get from you. And I've already got a number of recommendations of people to serve on the committee, which involves a tremendous number of faculty. And so I would say that if we can all work together, I think we'll certainly make this institution a lot stronger coming out than going in.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson, Dr. Norman. The next question, again, I'm going to direct it to Mr. Kazitz. How can we act to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of all, given the uncertainties in the situation? And I think we've actually touched a little bit about that but maybe if you could expand on that a little more.
Yeah, practice good social distancing, wash your hands, avoid hugging people, all those things. You know, we can give people all the guidelines, but we actually need people to listen and take it seriously and follow what we're preaching. You know, it's just like a tornado. We can tell you where the tornado shelters are, and we can tell you when the warnings happen, but we actually need people to heed those warnings and go to those areas. So we ask for help in reminding people about social distancing and the importance of washing their hands and not touching their face.
Thank you. The next question I want to direct to Dr. White. What opportunities and challenges can we reasonably anticipate?
Challenges are really the potential of lost enrollment. And that's not just a challenge for us, but many institutions across the state and the nation. I am concerned that our recent high school graduates will be entering a really tough job market. And they're going to be entering it at a time that people aren't going to be able to take much risk on hiring new people. And they also may not feel comfortable about returning or going to school. And so we don't know how they'll feel about financial aid or how they'll feel about leaving home. We don't know how uncertain their lives are. And so some of the challenge will be to convince people that higher ed is still the right thing. And studies are so clear that your life as an educated person, you have many, many, many more opportunities than the person who's not educated. And so we need to be able to continue to tell prospective students and their parents of the value proposition that it's not just about a particular class or a particular pedagogy, but it's getting that well-rounded education and then learning how, growing up and then having a degree to help you live that educated life. And then also be ready for whatever workforce there is. So that's one of the challenges. Another challenge, obviously, is the budget. We're not in control over that completely because some of it is tuition driven. Some of it has to do with state revenues, which we expect to decline. We know the state revenues have declined. We expect the contribution to the universities to also decline. And even though there is some money coming from stimulus packages through the federal government, it's not enough to plug the holes that we're facing. And so we're going to have to be very creative. And I'll reiterate what Vice President Robinson said. It is not about people. I'm going to try to do my very best working with our team to preserve our people. And that's not because I think we don't have any possibility of shifting around if we needed to, but we're a very lean campus already. We have a very small number of faculty and professional staff and administrators per FTE student. We're about the lowest in the state in all those categories. We're the second lowest in terms of clerical support staff and IT per FTE student. And so we just don't have a lot of excess, and we didn't hire a lot when we were working on our raises and getting people in at market. And so we don't have a lot of extra there. So where do we cut? Well, if 70 to 72% of our budget is in people, we have to be able to look at the 30%. And that 30% has some things that are givens, debt service, for instance, and we have contracts that we still have to pay. We're still obligated for those contracts, particularly things like D2L and Banner and utilities and those kinds of things. So there are fixed costs that we don't have a lot of control over. So that means that as we face this challenge, I need you to lay everything on the table. If it's something that is important to you but is not a person, I need you to be willing to say, I would give this up because I want to save my colleague. I would much rather tighten the belt on things than have to look elsewhere. So please be as creative as you can when you're talking about revenue generation and then also cutting the budget. Every student that we retain, though, every student that we save and every student that we enroll means less that we'll have to cut out of our budget and more people that we can help get their education. In terms of the opportunities, we can rethink how we do things. I'll use one. Remote work is good and can be good in the future. I'm not saying that we should all be doing it all the time. We can't sustain that. But certainly we need to be more liberal in how we think about working remotely for the jobs that can do it. And there are offices that have enough people in them that they could do some rotation where some people work at home sometimes and other people work at home other times. Well, who are those people? Who are those offices? We can be creative in how we address our work. I think we can be a little bit more flexible in how we have operated as a university. Most of our people, I think, are fabulous employees. Somebody asked me when we first got started, well, how do you know that somebody's going to do it the right way or handle it well? And I said, that's because that's who Austin P is. That's who our community members are. And frankly, if a person's not a great employee, that person's not going to be a great employee wherever he or she happens to work. So we need to be a little bit more liberal in how we see the work done. We do need to embrace technology in a better way. I'm sick of Zoom. I'm sick of Teams. By the time we get through this, I may be off of it for a while, but that's tongue in cheek because frankly, there are a lot of meetings that I could put to Zoom or Teams and not have the travel time or not have people walk across campus. I mean, we can use technology as a backup or as a tool. Now it's kind of like a weapon, but as a tool to help us be more flexible in how we handle business. And we can do more about paying online and how we interact online. So I think we can learn as an opportunity also that we cannot be surprised anymore. We have to master the technology that's available to us so that we're never surprised again, and that we can make choices that are informed choices and that are reasoned and practiced and skilled. And let me be clear, if I were teaching a class this semester, I would have been completely caught unaware. So this is not any kind of criticism to anybody. I'm just saying this is a lesson that we've all had to learn.
Thank you, Dr. White. This next question I'm going to direct to Dr. Gandy, and maybe Mr. Robinson, if you might want to touch on the financial aspects of this. But the question is regarding summer and fall 2020 courses and going forward, considering enrollment will be down, will course minimums be lowered?
Okay, this is really two questions because summer school, as you know, is totally different model than the academic year. Basically, we pretty much know we're going to be down about 10% this summer, and that's the same enrollment we had in 2017. So we have a model where actually we teach many more small classes in the summer than we do in the academic year. That's because the faculty compensation, once you go below 10, is adjusted based on that enrollment. So I don't think summer will be a problem at all. Basically, we'll be back where we were in 2017. As far as the financial and small classes go. For fall, basically during that regular academic year, we do run many small classes, but it's done on a case-by-case basis based on a request to the provost office from the chair and the dean. If we have a class with 9 students and has 9 graduating seniors who aren't going to graduate unless they get that class, guess what? We allow that class to go forward. So I don't think a blanket policy right now, not knowing what the enrollment in fall is going to be, and the fact that we do many exceptions on a case-by-case basis, I wouldn't recommend changing policy right now. But it's something that could be looked at down the road depending on how fall looks.
Yes, and the only thing I have to add, it might be something that the Financial Planning Task Force looks at, because if there's a decision to change something like that, obviously there may be a financial impact to it, and it may be a priority for the institution to make those changes. And if that's the case, then that Financial Planning Task Force can evaluate what the options are and how we would be able to cover that additional costs.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson and Dr. Gandy. That is all the submitted questions we've received. So I'm going to move over to the live questions that we've received since we started the meeting. The first one, I believe, is again one for Dr. Gandy. It says, I am an incoming faculty member. Are there alternate plans for orientation and other onboarding needs?
Obviously, a few months ago when we set up the orientation, which pretty much take up the whole month of August, we had a lot of meetings, and all that will get relooked at in the next couple of months, depending on the situation. But obviously, we'll set up processes and procedures using technology, things like that, to make sure all that orientation takes place, such that particularly the new faculty have their proper orientation to the university environment. And we will do that in a safe way that follows the guidelines to make sure that everyone is knowledgeable but safe.
Thank you, Dr. Gandy. The next question is a facilities question, so I'm going to direct it to Mr. Robinson. The question is if or when the campus returns to the new normal, the Clement building in particular in the basement is notoriously a notoriously poor environment for air quality and temperature. Can steps be taken to mitigate that?
Sorry, I had to unmute there. Certainly that we can look at that. I think it may require some capital maintenance money as far as a project, but we'll certainly do whatever we can to address the issue. It might not be as complete as we would like, but I think it's something that we need to look at. Quite frankly, when we not closed, but when we locked all the doors and we were putting signs on the windows, I actually had an opportunity to go through that building. And that was one of the things I did when I got back to my office was I contacted Tom Hutchins and I said, Tom, we need to do something over there because I just don't think that it was a little musty and that type of thing. So we need to address that. It might take several years because if it's a major mechanical upgrade or overhaul, that may actually take some capital maintenance money. And so we'll assess that. Tom is going to be assessing that, and he will then make a recommendation to me, and then that'll come before the senior leadership as well.
Thank you. The next question, I believe, is for Dr. Norman. Are there currently any students still on campus in housing?
Yes, we have about 185 students that are currently residing on campus. We have another 200 students that have their belongings still in the room because of the area being in lockdown. And they'll be hopefully moving out in the next few weeks.
Thank you. The next question is, I guess I'm going to direct that to Mr. Kazitz. Can masks, in other words, N95, the medical masks, be required or provided?
N95 masks are almost impossible to find right now, even if you're working in healthcare. And then with N95s, they have to be fitted properly. You have to have the right size or you might as well not be wearing one. So those types of masks, probably not. We did get in about 6,000 paper masks that are not N95s that can be used. But of course, they're for you to wear to protect others from you, not for you to get protection from others. And right now we're also expecting another 4,000 of those, but we haven't completely gotten the plans on how those will be distributed and what their uses will be. But we are working on ways that people can be protected, but we don't have hazmat suits for people to wear.
Thank you. And I believe the next question is probably in your arena too. How are you planning on supporting immunocompromised and higher risk faculty, staff, and students?
We're going to be working with our offices that deal with accommodations. So for faculty and staff, that would be Equal Opportunity Affirmative Action ADA, which would be Sheila Bryant and Lanisa Williams areas. For students, it'd be working with the Disabilities Office for accommodations.
Thank you. And I believe this question is probably for Mr. Robinson. Any thought being given to buying out senior faculty to allow for them to retire early, thus saving costs?
Sorry. Yeah, actually, that's an idea. I think that would probably come before that financial planning task force. I think everything's on the table, and these are the types of ideas. I just want to make sure everyone's perfectly clear on this. These are the kind of ideas that we're wanting to get from people. Anything is on the table. I mean, there's no idea that doesn't need to be considered. And so that's why we're reaching out and trying to get a very broad group on this task force to be able to go and talk to people and see what they think are ways that we could possibly save cost. Obviously, that's one that's probably going to be mentioned and probably looked at more closely. So I do appreciate the fact that you're already thinking about these things, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. This is a question, I believe, for Dr. Gandy. How will the adjunct faculty and one-year temps be affected by the financial changes?
Well, that will just depend on the given area and how the enrollment goes. Obviously, some areas may suffer larger decreases than others, and those areas may be employing fewer adjuncts. It'll just depend on almost a department by department look at how enrollment goes.
Thank you, Dr. Gandy. The next question is a financial question, but I think this may be something, well, Dr. White, I think, has already touched on this a little, as has Mr. Robinson, but the question is, can we get some data on financial stability of APSU? What is our tipping point for financial exigency?
I'll be glad to start on that one. First of all, again, and I hate to be repetitive, but we're going to have the Financial Planning Task Force look at various scenarios that affects the institution's financial stability. Once we have determined what those scenarios are, then we'll develop solutions for them. I don't know what the tipping point is at this point. Until that group actually gets together and starts looking at the data and considering the various scenarios that we will have before them.
Thank you. The next question is a CARES Act question, and I forget if Dr. Gandy or Mr. Robinson, okay, you're waving your hand. The CARES Act provided money to institutions to help universities and students make it through this period. How much funding did APSU receive? What is the decision process for determining how that money is being spent, and where is that money going as of now?
That's a very good question. And the CARES Act money that's coming directly to the institution actually will be drawing that down. It's almost like a grant. And the way that works is 50% of the money that's coming to the institution. First of all, there's about $9.8 million, I think, that is coming to Austin Peay. 50% of that has to go directly to students in the form of cash grants. And there are certain criteria that has been provided. The legislation was not really clear, but the interpretation by the Department of Education has determined how we can go about dispersing that money. First of all students that were taking classes online already will not be eligible for any of those funds, as well as international students will not be eligible for those funds, or DACA students. Again, these are rules that are not being determined by the institution. They are being determined by the Department of Education. We had a meeting this morning to look at what plans are for distributing that money. And I think we have the methodology figured out. It's just determining exactly how much that each student would receive that is eligible for the money. One of the things I've just seen some emails recently, all of the other institutions are about at the same point right now as we are. Most likely we'll be dispersing the funds next week, probably late next week. And that seems to be in line with what the other institutions are planning to do. We'll have some public information about that that will be available on our website, along with the FAQs that determine who and who is not eligible for that money. Now, I'll go into the second half of the money, this other 50%, and that's going to be, again, about $4.5 million, somewhere in that range. First and foremost, that money is eligible to be used to reimburse the institution for the refunds that were given for housing and also dining services. The rest of the money is fairly restricted in terms of how it can be used. We're working on clarifying that the definitions right now, and we'll be making the determination how those funds will be used here in the near future. One of the things I do know that you can use the funds for is what we have to provide to our students, to our faculty and staff in terms of being able to deliver instruction online, whether it's MiFis or whether it's laptop computers, that type of thing. So it can be used for those types of expenses, but again, it's fairly narrow. It can't be used for athletic buildings, that type of thing. So that was very specific, Gerald. Sorry about that. But again, we're going to be looking at how those can be used and how they can best support our students in the difficulties that they've been going through with this transition.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. The next question I want to direct to Dr. Gandy and Dr. Norman. Are all the rows, I'm sorry, let me start over. Gov's Row, have they all been moved to online for summer?
There's the one in mid-May has been moved online. We have a set of decision points roughly 3 weeks before each scheduled row. We're going to be making the decision whether to move it to online. So, but the next one has been moved pretty soon. The one after that will be coming up for a decision. So we have a set of rolling decision points. So you can just check with Dr. King Sanders on any of that exact answer.
Thank you. The next a question I think is for Mr. Kazitz. Will testing for COVID be a part of the return to campus? I think we've touched on that a little bit.
Well, I know we did in the student one, the student town hall, but we haven't, that decision hasn't been made and we don't anticipate it, but it may be. It all depends on availability of tests and where they're doing testing and how quickly we can get tests back from the testing labs. Right now, Tennessee and I think most of the nation is still struggling with testing, even though they're opening up more and more. So we just have to look at the availability and the need in the upcoming months.
Thank you. Dr. Gandy, I believe this is a question for you, and I think it's referring to currently. Are there restrictions on faculty working inside their on-campus offices?
I will defer. I think that's more of an HR question. I don't know.
Well, I'll be glad to answer that question. No, there are no restrictions on faculty working inside their own campus offices. The only thing I might add, though, as we start to come back, and including the faculty, look at your office and look at how it's arranged, and see if there's not some way to move your furniture around so that you can maintain an acceptable social distance with people that come in your office. We had to do that in my office. We had my administrative assistant was right there close to the door. We had the physical plant. They came over today and actually moved that desk back, and then we're probably going to put some tape on the floor or on the carpet so that people understand that when they come in the office that they don't go beyond that area until someone can meet their needs or come and address their needs. So it's going to require us to rethink or relook at what physical offices look like and how we can rearrange them so that we can maintain the recommended social distancing.
I'd like to jump in too. Please do your part to be very aware of the people around you. When we had most of the people off campus, but not everyone, when I would, and even now, when I walk on campus and see other people, they are walking side by side. They are not socially distancing until we put tape around the chairs at the UC. They were seated around the table just like they were having dinner at home. And I can't tell you how many people I have stopped and said, please, 6 feet, 6 feet. And I am a mama, but I'm not anybody's mama who's on the phone. So I really don't feel comfortable saying that, but it would really be helpful if you would do your part to ensure that the social distancing guidelines are followed.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson and Dr. White. The next question is, I think, a question for Dr. Gandy because it relates to programs. Should new program proposals be submitted given the difficulty in identifying budgets for hiring going forward, or is there an alternative plan for these programs?
This is really a budgetary question. Obviously, we've added several new academic programs the last few years. Some of those programs have, some of them have already made several hires, although there are some future hires. So obviously canceling a program that would be something to be considered and could go on this list that Mitch is being talked about. That's true of future new programs or old programs. I personally would not recommend canceling the new programs. That's sort of like eating your seed corn. These are the programs that are most likely to draw students that you're going to need in the future. So, but again, like Mitch said, you really need to look at all options, and those would be options. But there's some options are better than others.
Thank you, Dr. Gandy. I believe this next question is an academic related question, so I'm going to direct that again to you. If the university moves forward with having face-to-face hybrid classes in the fall, has there been any consideration given to moving some of those classes that were supposed to be face-to-face to online to give students more options for online classes if they don't feel safe coming to campus, and to reduce the amount of people on campus at any given time?
As the president mentioned earlier, we're starting to get a lot of feedback from our student surveys, and there is a real unease among the students with being totally online. If we're able to, I think we should really go back to some type of modified face-to-face. I think that will make our students have a better experience. However, we would have to obviously consider the safety issues. So as she talked about, modifications to ensure safety will be very important. So that can be looked at, it can be looked at and considered, but this type of university we have is not really made to be a totally online university. We will not have a bright future if we compete with the Western Governors and Southern New Hampshire's, because that's just not our particular mission or niche. So it can be looked at.
Let me give you some food for thought too. My analogy won't be as good as the don't eat your seed corn analogy, but it is kind of a chicken or egg situation. The whole idea is to reduce density, to try to get fewer people on campus at any given time so their exposure is less. So when I was a student, I took 15 hours and I took 18 and I took 21 because I wanted to graduate in 3 years. But I was on campus a lot with a lot of people all the time. Now students take fewer hours and they tend to either like a lot of them online or a lot of them face-to-face. Often a student will take maybe one course online. But even if we had a student who really wanted to take face-to-face classes, but could work a schedule where 2 or 3 classes were face-to-face and 2 were online, that greatly reduces density if more students would do that. However, if the classes are not built to offer it, the students have no choices to take it. So that's the chicken or the egg piece. I think even the students who say they really don't like online, many of them just didn't like being thrown into the chaos that the semester gave us all, and they don't know the difference necessarily between a really good online class and one that had to be haphazard. And so I can't tell you I'm talking to department chairs and deans right now with their faculty. I can't tell you what the mix is. I will encourage you to have more choices for students, because especially in multiple section classes, you know, my sister-in-law is a professor in Florida and she teaches fully online, but it's an RN to BSN program. So they have a lot of their classes online, but they also have some on the ground that mirror, and then students would have options. But if you don't plan to offer any really robust online programs or classes, students won't have those options. And then I think you're in a bind too. So I would just look at strategies to reduce the density on campus generally.
Thank you. I see now we have actually arrived at our hour. So I think we probably need to wrap it up. Dr. White, are there any closing remarks you'd like to provide? You're muted.
I just clicked on the chat function so I'd see what those last questions are, and almost all the questions had to do with athletics. And so I do want to close, but I am going to ask Gerald to speak to the athletics questions since there's a lot of interest at once. I'm serving as the OVC's representative to the Presidential Forum for Division I, and we had a meeting this week. And the NCAA is really loath to say that all the conferences and all the states are going to work on X schedule, because the guidelines are really different across the United States. And so there's going to be some guidance perhaps, but I don't see a time, and Gerald can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see a time that the NCAA is going to come up with a firm hand and say, this is the schedule for the nation. I think I might feel more comfortable if they would, but I have a hunch that they're not going to be as firm on that. And so the questions, Gerald, have to do with that schedule, and then also if it's going to impact athletic scholarships. And if you'll answer those, then I'll wrap it up, if you guys will give us just a couple more minutes. You muted.
I agree. Oh, sorry. All right, here we go. I agree with Dr. White. The NCAA is not going to, it doesn't seem they're going to tell everybody when it's time to return to action. There'll be some guidelines in place and suggestions, best practices, but it's nothing that we're not going through right now with our outstanding COVID task force who's working with the governor and working with the CDC and all these other people to put us in a great place to proceed. So it won't be the NCAA that dictates our return. It'll be us working in conjunction with our conference and working in conjunction with our leadership from a governmental standpoint. As for the scholarships, we're going to do our best, like Dr. White mentioned, when she spoke to about the staff, we're going to do our best not to impact our student athletes in any way. So the number of scholarships that we currently offer for intercollegiate athletics, we're going to do our best to maintain that and give our teams the best opportunity to succeed, and our student athletes an outstanding experience while playing athletics here at Austin Peay.
Thank you, Gerald. And there's been one more question that popped up, and I think it's a good one to ask for Dr. Gandy. Will there be universal guidelines for granting leniency to students experience limited technological quality and access?
Will there be universal guidelines? Obviously, this particular situation has created lots of special cases. So the guideline here is flexibility. We will look at things that in the past we wouldn't have looked at. We're not going to put out any broad announcement that anything goes, but on a case-by-case basis, special consideration will be considered.
Thank you, Dr. Gandy. And that was the last question we had submitted, and we are at the hour, so I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. White for some closing remarks.
I've talked a lot already. Just know that I have your back. If I can help, I will. I've got a team of people on this call who are also ready to help you in any way. Danelle Whiteside is really helping us stay ahead of the legal issues that could come, because there could be some. And of course, she's got a wonderful assistant there in Donovan, and who is my child would have never done that at his age, sit there all day, but he's been awesome. And Carol Clark was working on our behalf with the legislature. I'll tell you, the legislature will come back in session in June, and then we'll know more about what the budget situation is. Thank you to Ron Bailey and his group also on the SPIT group, and the rest of us you've heard from. So we are working hard on your behalf. Thank you for what you're doing for students. Govs lead, and I mean you. Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, we'll be posting these recordings or the recordings of these sessions on our social media sites where additional questions can be submitted. Thank you for joining us and have a great rest of the day.